I have this bad habit of forgetting to introduce myself at the beginning of my vlogs or my videos these days, and then I have to add it after. But hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you don't know who I am, my name is Offense and I am your book bae. Your book bae is in the building. Today we're at Hyde Park Corner. I'm just about to go up now to Sue Nyathi's book launch. I forget what the name of the book is called now. I think it's and yeah, I'm not going to be talking much. This is just going to be footage of what's actually happening at the launch. Listen, it's after day of work, and if you watch my previous video, I'll let you know that I don't do the makeup thing or anything like that when I go to work because of this baby. So
Welcome to the launch of Family Affair by Sue Nyathi. Thank you so much for joining us for our first physical launch since lockdown. Please maintain your mask on and keep a safe distance from everyone. On stage tonight is our author Sue Nyathi and Karabo Kole, who will interview her. Sue has been writing since she started secondary school. This is her third novel, following on from The Gold Diggers and The Polygamist. Sue is from Bulawayo, and the action and drama in this book take place there. Despite her love for writing, Sue worked in finance for many years, but is now writing for generations. When she's not working on her novels. Sue will be speaking to Karabo, who is an avid reader, public speaker and writer, specializing in arts and literature. She is also a broadcaster on 702. And now I hand it over to him. Thank you.
Thank you. Guys, that was nice. It's our first book launch. Thank you, Hyde Park Exclusive Books. Thank you, Peg and Melanie. Thank you all for being so brave to join us. But mostly thank you to our superstar. I don't know how she does it, because your novels get bigger and bigger. Sue Nyathi, what an honor to have you here.
Thank you everyone for coming through.
So now, because just a few house rules, because we're dealing with new normals, so it's not the same kind of format that we used to have pre-COVID, where there'd be time for Q&A. So unfortunately, can't happen. So you're going to have to just give us a little bit of time. I will think about other ways that we can make it interactive. Maybe have a WhatsApp thing, someone WhatsApps a question, but we're starting now and we'll figure it out. Yeah?
Or maybe why can't people could write them down whenever it's here. If you've got a little piece of paper, if you have. Yeah.
Okay, the Exclusive Books provide a piece of paper, and then, because I really want to give you an opportunity to also engage with the author, because you literally risked your lives to come in. So, A Family Affair, show of hands is ready yet? Okay, cool. So we're not going to go too much into the story because we don't want to spoil it. and we hope that this will get you interested enough to buy it. And so this is your third book. You started with The Polygamist, and it was kind of like you were feeling your way, but I could tell with the way that you wrote it that I was like, okay, this woman is bringing some game. Like in SAFM, 2011?
2012. Yeah,
2012,
2012, yeah.
So it was just like, okay, something's coming, and then you chilled for 6 years, and you're like, boom, gold days, and you're like, boom, just as we're trying to get over green leaf, right? And I mean, there's no way you could have written this after green leaf. Is anyone familiar with green leaf? Yeah. So for those of you who are not familiar with green leaf, very briefly, it's a series on Netflix, it's Oprah funded and all of that, and it's about this family in the South in the US who it's a family of a super church. So the dad, the patriarch, is this bishop, and the mom is the first lady. But it's also got lots of themes that are very similar to how we experience, because it is a black, post-slavery, post-colonial, middle-class experience, which is about showing that you have earned your place in the world, showing that you have earned the blessings of God that make you rich, and showing that you're in a position to lead and empower people, and that you deserve that beautiful place. But meanwhile, there's still things going on at home in the background and stuff to clean up, right? And it's also about what will people say, because you're going to take on that role as like a church family. You're going to moralize to everyone with like what's happening in the house. And it happened it was so crazy that, when Span sent me the manuscript, I was like, but I just got over like this previous season now, really. So, I mean, what do you make of that scene? That it could happen this way, that just as this comes out, and it's a conversation that we are having all over the place about how the carefully constructed middle classness, morality of ourselves as liberated, responsible, liberated black people, that it's falling apart, and then artists such as yourselves are actually sort of showing that back to us in story.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the genesis of this book, like I said, began when I was 20. So even long before we came into the scene, I was already thinking about these themes and what it meant to grow up in a middle-class black family. And the issues that I identified then, when I look back at them, because what happened with this book, I started writing in my 20s, and there were so many drafts of it, and I sort of left it. And when I turned 40, I was like, I need to revisit this manuscript again, because the issues are still the same, they're still bubbling under the surface, and I need to tackle it. So that was the thought process behind the book. And the thing is, we all have these facades that we wear, and the church is also one of them that we hide behind. So, we like to keep up appearances. And so it's always nice, I think, as a writer to look behind those appearances, because there's always something behind the facades. So that was interesting for me to explore.
So you see, some of the big books do take years to happen, There is this writer, he wrote an article for the New Yorker, his name is Adam Gopnik, and he says that everything, faith, science, love, needs a story for people to find it plausible. No story, no sale. And he goes on to bemoan the platitudes that explain why we want, or why stories appeal to us. And he says we love stories because they help us find meaning, they give us a sense of what is moral, what isn't, they give us a sense of escape. Sue, what is your favorite platitude or explanation for why we love stories?
I totally agree with him. It's with story you have latitude to take it anywhere, anyhow you want it, Whereas I find fiction is more rigorous in terms of where you can take a story to. So that's why I prefer non-fiction. That's why I prefer writing fiction, because you can take it anywhere, and it appeals to people, because people also want that latitude to be able to escape through writing. And what better way to transport people to all sorts of places? I do this in this book. You go all sorts of places. You go to Bulawayo, you go to the BVI, you go to Cape Town. So it's just that experience as well. And you live with this family. You're invited into this family's home, and you become one of the children who are fly on the wall. lives for the duration of the book. You feel their pain, you feel their joy, and I think that's a nice thing about storytelling.
What I find completely fascinating, exciting about fiction, just even as a technology, is that we all agree that this is made up, but we all take you on your word that you're going to make it plausible enough to match our reality, and we're actually going to get involved and go with you. You know, and I'm always fascinated by how creators of fiction are able to do that. I mean, have you had moments in your process where you're like, but actually, this doesn't feel like something that would actually happen in real life? Or is real life such great kind of fodder for story that because anything can happen in real life, anything can happen in a story?
Yeah, look, with me, I think my stories are reality, or I call them fiction, because there is some truth to what I write, and so I'd say that, you know, my fiction is inspired by reality, because, you know, because that's where my inspiration comes from, like the lived experiences, the things that, you know, often or resonate with me. That's the kind of things I want to write about. But obviously, I mean, I create, you know, fictional characters, but I think, you know, the themes that I tackle are rooted in reality. I think that's true across, you know, all my books.
I'll explain to you why I asked you that story. I'm not going to be pilled too steep, but I'm going to talk about myself a little bit. we also read Twitter, guys. So my scholarship, I'm doing social science, right? A postgrad in social science, and I'm making an argument for fictional narratives as an empirical tool to understand social processes. And the biggest paradox is that unlike other methodologies of studying social science, when you're studying the real, you know, you have participants who are telling you their stories, you know, the real. You're looking at documents, you're looking at the census, you're looking at birth and death certificates, you're looking at newspaper articles. You're taking a fictional text where one of the fundamental things that you need to use, you know, for empirical studies, for it to be something valid sociologically, is that it has to be true. You know, so philosophically it starts to play nicely with like what we're talking about when we say it's true. So
yeah, the thing is, so, you know, I like Jane Austen a lot, and when you talk about social anthropology, I mean, that sort of rings a bell in my head, because, you know, I would like for, you know, someone 20, 30 years from now could be able to pick up my book and be able to see how people lived, what was society like then. So, you know, I think unlike the academic way of doing things, this might be more informal, but I think it's still very informative.
And I think it's more socially important than what any social scientists would do, in the sense that it's already in the public domain, and that's where the social action happens, when your readers interact with that fiction. It doesn't have to be put in a library or put in a headline. And I think it's that intimacy that I think we all enjoy as readers, and it's what makes us who we are as readers.
Yeah, and the focus group happens in a book club setting. So instead of an experiment, like a science experiment, we have women who sit together and they dissect the book, you know, and how it relates and cuts through their own lives and lived experiences. So
let's talk about the evolution of the book club, right? Because 10 years ago, book clubs weren't burning out of the floor the way that they are now. I mean, I dare to venture to say that book clubs are probably one of the most valuable, you know, not just distribution channels or points of sale, in terms of, you know, how long a book's life will last and how many people get to read it, and that book's life has a conversation outside of itself, and even outside of a radio studio, outside of a review in a newspaper, because it's in a group of people who choose to congregate around it.
Yeah. And I love book clubs for that very reason, because I always say the writing process is very long. I mean, when you begin a book, you incubate it, and it's like it gestates in you. It's like a pregnancy. I mean, it's not like you can share it because you're carrying it. And so, because, you know, for a long time, I mean, like for the past 2 years when I've been working with this, you know, it's just been me and the characters and this world in my head. And so, when you finally put it out there, you know, the book is open to interpretation anyhow. People will decide how they decide to consume it and receive it. So for me, writer, it's always interesting to engage, with those conversations and hear the questions. And sometimes, readers raise things that you didn't even think about, or they see things that you didn't even think about. So for me, that's always the engagement that I enjoy from the book club. So.
And I suppose what works for them really well for you and for authors such as Ego Duka, such as Cynthia Jele, Angela Makora, Zuki Swabanya, basically the big writers of this moment, is that you are writing to a reading audience that has also reimagined and reformed what it means to be black middle class in Africa. Right? These book clubs are run by black professional women. Hala BTC, Bukamoso, Bookworms, there's only three that, but I mean, they're active on Twitter and they really interrogate the book. So you know that they have a longer life than just they bought 10 copies and that's okay. So I think it's just really wonderful that they do that.
It is. We definitely need more class.
Alright, so we need to get to family affair next. And I want to speak to place, because who we are and the way we become, place has a lot to do with it, because place is about where the opportunities are available, place is about where we're able to back up our history. I mean, if I was to say, I fought as an MK soldier in 1992 in Centurion. But there's a way, and this is where realism in fictional texts like Sue Nyathi's work actually works, because it's also historically accurate. So when you look at the parents, at the king and queen of this home and of this empire and how they met, is that it's located accurately in history. And even how the love affair that led to the union between Pumla and Father Abraham, I'm not going to call him Pastor Abraham, I'm going to call him Father Abraham for a reason, is that it was embedded in a particular place in the social history of Southern Africa, right?
Yeah.
And you also track the development of that emerging black middle class, and to some extent the disintegration of that middle class now in us, because we're the generation that's messing it all up, because the systems fall apart at our age, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain why it was really important for you, even though it's a made-up story, to be accurate to where it was going on in history, and also for the educative role for a lot of people who are reading it who don't have access to that history?
Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, I also want to capture the history behind it that informs all my story, the background story. So it's not the main story, but it forms the background. And to show the different relations. I mean, Pumla in the book is Xhosa, and they met, she meets Father Abraham. It's not Father Abraham then, at Fort Hare, and that's where they fall in love. And for a lot of people here, you might not know, there is a huge Xhosa community in Bulawayo. Okay, that's where the book is where I come from. And it just shows that, and they came to life many years ago. They just, they integrated. And I also want to show that our relations are just beyond, Zimbabweans coming across. We also had South Africans coming to Zimbabwe. And, through marriages, well, integrated. And our roots are deeper than the superficial, that we see. So that's also why, it's important to always, touch on the history as well.
But you do it so beautifully. And I think it's so important, given the moment that we're in South Africa, where we're grappling with issues of sort of, I call it nationalistic bigotry, where it's like, oh, you are from there, so you can't have access to this, you're taking my jobs. And we all know that it's part of, some political machinations, because people are not addressing, governance issues. And that it also speaks to a kind of shared ancestry, right? Because you're mentioning Xhosa women went, Xhosa people Xhosa people went to Rhodesia, North and South Rhodesia back in those days, because it was still during the times of the armed struggle. It even happened before that, because Fort Hare stopped being an independent university, it became an apartheid university, but there were still kind of students who were kind of working underground during that period. And there's lots of texts that speak to that, but they're boring. And what's beautiful is when a fictional work like this comes out, it actually brings color to it, because it tells a story in the sense of like individuals, you know. And then even going further than that, a lot of Ndebele people trace their ancestries to South Africa, right? Because they're the descendants of Mzili guys, you know. So when we think about who's a foreigner and who isn't, we have to think about how the creation of the nation state is basically an extension of colonialism. So when we start calling black Africans who are not South Africans foreigners, we are behaving the same way as the people that that oppressed us.
And then, you know, I talk of the middle class because, I mean, Zimbabwe got its independence much earlier. And so you had more time for the rise of that middle class. And it's nice, I think, to look at a different social strata of Zimbabwean life, because a lot of times when you talk about Zimbabwe, people think the whole country is just poverty-stricken, and that's not a true reflection. And one of the reasons why Zimbabwe is in the dilemma is because, you know, you have a privileged class, you have middle class, then you have, you know, the poorer classes, and there's no unity in terms of thought. You know, some people are quite happy with the way things are, you know, because they don't struggle. And I think it's important to illuminate that, you know, that there is a different class of people that do live in Zimbabwe who enjoy certain privileges, and I try to do that in the book as well. And once again, it's not, I do it through story. It's through Xoliswa's relationship. She meets that minister, and what does that do, you know, in her life? You know, it elevates her life, the black tax issue, you know, because of those kind of things. So, but it's in a story, so it doesn't come across as preachy. It's just part of the story.
And I know you're a woman of very strong and solid principles, and sometimes I forget that I'm actually reading like a very solid woman's story. She's not, Sue Nyathi is not like fukaring by the wind, you know, she's very, very solid in who she is. It's like, but you have so much empathy, and you know, you bring so much nuance, and and that's what I enjoy about your books. I don't feel as if like you're hovering over my head saying, Xolis was a bad person. Father Abraham is a dog. And you know the boys. You know what's happening in South Africa, right? You know you have the black boys who went to all the rugby schools, yes, and they're all falling apart now, like, as human beings, right? This happened in Zim, like in the 90s.
So I hear you call them cheese boys here. So in Zimbabwe, it's a generic term for both women and, you know, both men and women. They call it salads. I'm a salad, you know, because it was just assumed they lived, you know, in the other part of town, in the suburbs. They ate salads, you know, because of, you know, the wow. So it's a term, but it covers all. So you could be a guy and call the salad, and so it's just, you know, it was a, you know, strand of separating, you know, the kids from the more affluent neighborhoods who went to the private schools. So you have this generation. And Zim is very classist, I need to add. The school you went to matters, even after you leave high school.
It's like South Africa. No, I have a joke. And I'm subtweeting my ex. How do you know a guy went to Michael House? He tells you. But you know what? It's still like that today. You know that it's still like that today. When you send your kid, who's got kids in high school? When you got your kid to that school, how did you feel? Right? Because you know, with the application and the job already, it's like socially you know that you set your child at least somewhere that even if you die without a funeral policy, your child will have the privilege, accent, the culture, and all these things, right?
Yeah. So it's that same thing, and you know, dating across, you know, it was like it was a big thing, you know. So yeah. And we have Yandi.
Hey!
The things, you know, when you.
I call her Yandi. At the back of my mind, I'm like, oh Yandi, what you up to now, girl? You know, she goes to the ghetto, but she actually makes like proper coin for herself in ways that her sisters couldn't. The one sister married like a has-been big guy, and the other sister was, you know, she ended up, you know, I don't want to give it away too much, but she's one of the big qualifications. And Nyathi, the one who shaped the family by marrying down and moving to the ghetto, actually had her own bag. It was her salon, it was her things. So I also love how you show that there are different ways that we can exercise agency as women, because the comparison is not to make the other sisters losers, but you give nuance as to how, given also your place in the family and the decisions that you have, and how you have agency no matter what. Now I want to speak to you about how all three of your novels, including this one, for me, they read like a kind of love letter to Bulawayo. Because I've not been to Bulawayo. Who's been to Bulawayo? Let's show hands. So I haven't been to Bulawayo, but the way that you write Bulawayo, and I've had the honor of reading all three of your books, but here you really, now I call it the city of kings, and I know like Leopold Street, and I haven't even looked at the map, and then some of those streets, some of those acres, they actually come back in the novels, in little bits and pieces. You're able to create a map of the city in a reader's imagination, even though they've never ever been there. In addition to Bulawayo being your hometown, what is it about that city that is able to capture the imagination so much?
I think, okay, so to be honest, I think a lot of it is, it's nostalgia as well, the sentimental value. I'm writing of a place that's no longer there. The Bulawayo I grew up in is not the Bulawayo that exists now. So I think, I don't want to lose it, and so I'm trying to capture it in my writing. So in a way, it could be indulgent, but I just feel like it was a beautiful time and place, which I want to, just treasure the essence and the beauty of that place when it was what it was, at a certain point in time. And The Polygamist was set in Harare, so there's not much of Bulawayo there. The gold diggers, they leave Bulawayo, so you don't really, get the essence of it. But I think with this book, I really wanted to really capture, Bulawayo in its entirety.
Yeah, because the Polygamist, the sense of Bulawayo that I got was that you don't want to end up there, right?
Yeah.
And then in the Polygamist, it was just like, as they're leaving and they're going through, it's almost like it's a goodbye trip as they're leaving Bulawayo and going through the old avenues. They used to be a place of greatness. They also used to reflect certain things in your life. Your mother warning you that I'm gonna beat you up the way that Leopold guy did. And then now it's almost like you've given Bulawayo that place, and I think it's very important as urban Africans, to give cities that kind of meaning. But I also reflected upon it in a way, in a sense of how Bulawayo as a place also kind of represented the hopes and aspirations of the Mfu family that didn't turn out the way that they thought they would, like even as individuals or as a unit. And also a kind of grief for what could have been, in terms of the outcome, whether it's the parents' expectations of the kids' expectations of themselves. What are your thoughts on that?
I think even as a city itself, you sort of grieve because it didn't, it had so much potential that was never realized. So I think a lot of dreams died with Bulawayo in a way, And even the name Bulawayo, where people were, died or killed, I think, so for me it's a lot of dreams, aspirations that died in that city. And a lot of people left. So when you talk about polygamists, you felt that way. It's not a city that people want to be. And it's true, a lot of people left it to go find, employment elsewhere in Harare. And so, if you read Titi, Bettina and all the other prominent Zimbabwean writers, they focus on Harare a lot. So I just felt like, it was like a gap in terms of, let our city feature, in a good way, because there were good things about it.
And I think you're doing that fantastically. I really have to say. Please give her a round of applause. So then let's get to the juice or a taster, because you don't want to spoil it for everyone. You have a great taste for scandal.
But life is filled with scandal.
Honey, I follow you on Twitter. I'm like, who opens up to you that way? And then we talk about scandal, and we all know what scandal means. It's a bit of Schadenfreude because we all have our shame. Sometimes we like to feel better that, have more scandals than us. Because, ours are so stinky, stanky, So, what are your favorite scandals in this, in your novel, A Family Affair?
The dad, definitely. His scandals. And, I think there's this thing about our parents acting like they didn't do anything wrong. I mean, they did worse things, but they like to act like, we were angels. And, I mean, if you think about this book, there's nothing that the daughters did that the parents didn't do. It's not, yeah. So, and it's always looking at that lens to say, you've been there too, and you know what it's like. Yeah.
So what do you think it is about parents? Because Una and Abraham struggle with this, with dealing with their daughters' scandals, and a lot of what happens to their daughters is not the daughters being scandalous like out of their own volition. They are oppressed, and they try and make the best decisions they can with what they know. And they also own their mistakes to a large extent. But what is it about parents refusing to see that even when their daughters call them out on something, like, you're not the one to be telling me this?
Yeah, but all parents are like that. And that's why we will always say parents should normalize saying sorry, especially African youth, but they don't. They always want to have that, have the high, stand on the high road and we have the final say and sign up in every conversation. You can't speak to me because of the authority.
And the spiritual bypass.
Yes.
I already apologized to Jesus, I don't need to apologize to you.
Yeah, so, and I think that's amplified. So I use the church a lot because I think there's this little righteous arm that starts to wear. And they think, and I think it comes, from being born again. You feel like you're tight. Because you've been washed clean. So, and I think that also gives it another in terms of
You led me so beautifully to the next question, which is, because I'm thinking about transnationality, and female identities in your story, and how, like, it's the women's identities that actually cross borders more than men's do, both in terms of them marrying and divorcing and having certain children that are boys and children that are girls, and coming from different tribes, different backgrounds, and how even their social status change. Even your citizenship within a culture changes, whether you are single, married without a baby, married with a baby, married with a boy, widowed, how you're widowed, how did he die, all of those things, So as women, our citizenship, even in our own families and communities, is always contested. We're waiting for visas until we die.
It's true.
And you do that so beautifully with that. But, and that is a reality for mobile Africans, and we did touch on that. But now, I love how you go into denominationality. So you have the constraints, but also the long-established, comfortable traditions of the high church. In the case of this story, it's the Catholic Church versus the modern, spectacular, evangelistic, church that's all about a huge show, and that everything you did now is gone. So even this idea of absolution no longer exists because you got born again. And your novel presents these tensions in a very interesting way. What are your observations, in addition to what you just told me about, what you've seen about these tensions, both in society, in Bulawayo society in Johannesburg, in society, and also it's not even a Bulawayo and Johannesburg thing anymore, because we are global black middle class. Those of you who are like black middle class like us on Twitter, when things start trending, they trend all over the world, no matter where they began, because we're all going through the same thing as the middle class black family, right? Globally. What have been your observations?
I think it's the same everywhere. You've had an exodus from your traditional churches to your Pentecostal churches. You see it everywhere. In Europe, you find a lot of traditional churches are scaling down, closing down. They will turned into other uses because they don't pull in the congregations anymore. And I think they've lost their appeal. I remember there was this video that trended where the priest in the Catholic Church, they were dancing to Jerusalem, and a woman was horrified. How can they keep this sacrilege happening? And I think a lot of this, the reason is because the Catholic Church hasn't really adapted. They've tried to, maintain that same era, the centuries ago. And this is another thing that the book questions. A lot of these traditions that we hold on to. I mean, some of them need to go. They become redundant. But we still hold on to them. And I think we need to sort of be looking at those kind of things. We may have done things that way, but is that, we've done it that way, but it's not necessarily the right way of doing it. And maybe there are other ways of doing things, and we should be open to do it, and re-looking at some of these things. So whether it's the church, status, and just the different, things, marriage.
But I want to bring us back to church, right? Because you're Catholic, I'm culturally Anglican. I don't practice, but I identify culturally as Anglican, his daddy and his dad. And for me, also, it means a lot because it's about values. It's about how you show up in the world. It's about stuff that's actually beyond the church and what it means to be human. So I was raised with that kind of. It was a liberation theology. So there was a particular kind of theology within, we call it the high church. So it's the Lutherans, the Methodists, the Catholics, and the Anglicans. And they also embedded in the liberation theology that informed the liberation of African countries from colonization. And that's also why we landed in those middle classes as these kids, right? And we take it seriously, we do. But now when you're presented with Pentecostal practices and what makes the Pentecostal practices really appealing is that they don't have that class element. You don't need to be a descendant of, And they also don't have, I find that there's a little bit more room for maneuver for more syncretic practices.
I disagree. I mean, there's also a very distinct hierarchy, even in Pentecostal churches. The front row is a big thing, who tries the most, and that's still very big. So it might not, it's more of a money thing, I think, than maybe,
Then maybe an inheritance thing.
Yeah, so it's still there. I think all churches have their thing.
Yeah. We'll have this conversation away from the crowd, because there are a lot of things to think about. You think about people like Desmond Tutu and the way that history, especially woke Black history, started to look at them in a different way. That is not the way that we saw him when we were coming of age, and how that locates us in the age of corruption, mass corruption. You've got like these grand pastors that are flying in Learjets and all of that, and how do we make sense of it? And I think your book does a very human, does a very human job of looking at what makes it appealing to people, without sort of writing off either side.
For me, it's the book. You don't have to perform. It's not performative. You just have to come up to the altar. They put your hands on you, and you're born again. Whereas in the traditional church, there's a sense of having to work for redemption, and I think that's the two different, the major distinctions between the two. There's also this thing like,
But you don't have to work for it.
Yeah, you don't have to work.
That's interesting. And I'd love to have your thoughts, guys. We're also on Twitter, so you can tweet at us and everything. Are we running out of time?
No,
Okay, you can write your questions on paper. Terry will pass the paper around. This thing about the church. It's very, very deep. And okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is that.
Okay, so once we're on the church, I mean, the main thing the church has got and relationship. I think all those things are good until they are abused. So if you think of the word abuse, it's formed use. Use is
It's the root word, yeah.
And then if you add a, so it becomes normal. If you add a, it becomes a normal. So I think everything is good until it's what it's meant. And I think like everything, most things in the world, the church, the walla, they are abused in a sense, and so it becomes a very negative thing. So I think in essence, a lot of things are made for them. It's just how they end up.
It is what it is. But the book is not a drag. But what you do before the questions come through is that you do throw down a party. There are so many beautiful events, like the party scenes in A Family Affair just they're spectacular.
In the weddings, yeah.
In the weddings, how did you do that? I can't want to say the one to give away that there's more than one wedding. But how did you do that? To just making that scene, because those are something that, it lives in sort of the grand imagination, right? The best party you ever have is your wedding.
Because I think life is like that. It's filled with moments, and you remember the moments. So I mean, with any family, if you think of all the pictures you have in your house, it was an occasion of some sort, and so I think those are important for the memories, to capture the memories, and when you always come together for those kind of occasions, whether it's a birthday, a wedding. And you always hang on to it. You'll be like, oh, I remember Sbanban, that time. There's always that. It's more of the memory as well, which is important when you write.
Would you like to read while we're collecting more questions?
Okay, cool.
From our perfect wedding?
Our perfect wedding. So I have these titles throughout the book for the chapters.
Yeah, step chapter 1, 2, 3. It's almost like watching a series, but with standalone chapters. Except you need to have seen the previous one.
Yeah. Our perfect wedding. I'm sure you all remember that Sunday show. The reception is held at the iconic Nesbitt Castle, set amidst well-groomed gardens and acres of sprawling manicured lawns. The Gothic-looking castle immediately evokes images of a damsel in distress, imprisoned by a ruthless lord, waiting to be rescued by her knight in shining armor. It is an ethereal setting which forms a perfect backdrop for a garden wedding. Even the weather has complied, and no dark clouds have formed, admonishing any likelihood of a downpour. Uniformed waiters circle the garden, serving drinks and pretty hors d'oeuvres, which cause people to complain that there is no real food. A violinist plays music in the background, serenading the guests, while the bridal party are taken to sequestered spots in the grounds of the venue to capture the iconic moments on camera. Nesbitt Castle is a prestigious venue, and Zandile had fought hard to secure it because her father had wanted to host the wedding in his church, so he could invite the entire congregation. He didn't care too much about the ambience or the photos. He just wanted the flock of his congregation to witness the momentous occasion. In the end, Zandile won the battle, and they had whittled the invites down to the elders of the church and those who tithed generously. She couldn't have allowed her father to steal her teenage dream. Many nights when they were growing up, Yandisa and her sisters had lain awake at night, planning and plotting their weddings. Yandisa was the one who always spoke about having a big wedding with 1,000 guests, but Zandile had always wanted a small, intimate one.
I hope you're ready to buy your copies. Take this book. And please don't read it like I did. I had to read it with a deadline. Alright, so I've got a few questions here for you from our participants. Because you are participants in the audiences, otherwise it doesn't mean you. Sue. Lundi would like to know, her comment question says, you compare the writing process being similar to incubating a baby. I suppose having it finally published and launched is you giving birth to it. What thoughts and emotions do you go through or experience when your baby is finally being consumed?
Well, it's always that there's always that anxiety, like, will people like it? Because I'm also a reader as well. And, I read writers, you read their first 2 books, then the third one is disappointing. And you're like, man, I'm done. So you now in the same sort of, in the same sort of position because, you gain readers, you lose readers. So so you always have, it's always interesting, like, how will it be received? But, once, I've given birth to it, and I'm happy with it, I'm like, I hope for the best, generally. Once it's out there, it's out there. And, I did it, have a life of its own. You just have to let go.
And Sunshine knows it's not a competition, right?
No, definitely not.
Hey, because it's that thing, when we're raising our kids on our own, and we've got the thing that we love, and we've got the kid that we love. We're like, oh, okay, well, I love this thing, but I love you, baby. Why not, So as long as your kid knows that it's what makes mommy the best that she is, I think that's it makes it worthwhile, right?
Yeah, but I don't think he likes the time, because writing is consuming. It takes, you become very absorbed to it. But, these past 2 years have been good in the sense that, I've been able to write like in the mornings when he's at school. And so when he comes home, I switch, I become present because it's easy to just live in this other world,
Yeah, pretend. Yeah, you think that just because you're in the room, you're around.
Yeah, really
like
not.
that.
Yeah.
So this one's not signed, but it says, during your writing process, do you ever get to a point where you are emotionally drained by what's happening in your story? If yes, how do you pick yourself up and continue writing no matter how sad the story may be?
Okay, so it happens, but I felt more emotionally drained writing the Gold Diggers than I did with this book.
Yeah, I know that Gold Diggers is
So, this wasn't as emotionally draining as the Gold Diggers was. And so when people say to me, will you write a sequel of the Gold Diggers? I often say no, because I don't want to go back to that place. It was a dark place where it exists for a very long time. Whereas, so with this, with this book,
it's a great book, it's a brilliant book, but you need to be strong when it's okay. It's just, the thing is, they haunt you forever.
Yeah.
Now I'm writing a thesis about it, because it's like, but it is, because you're dealing with really heavy things, and you kind of knock them out so rapidly, because the book is this thing, right? And also, I can tell that it's part of the research that you did, so maybe it might have been quite that cathartic, and it's a good book to have, but I'm glad that you actually got to give us something that, it's still dealing with the hard things, but it's not as gut-wrenching as the Gold Diggers.
Yeah, so this book tends to be sort of light. It's not as hard-hitting. I remember listening to this review of this French lady on YouTube, and she said, to read the Gold Diggers, you need to be in the right frame of mind, because Sue Nyathi will pick you up and put you, So I think, this one is a different kind of story, and it wasn't as emotionally draining on me to write. With the Gold Diggers, I often had to, take breaks and gather myself.
Take a bath and pray. Yes, sis. Sue, the fate you dealt those poor people. This one is not a single. Anyway, if you ever read the Gold Diggers, it's okay. A family affair has a large number of different characters and family trees. How did you keep track of all the families? In addition, where did you get the names for all the characters?
Yeah, so the family affair is actually, it's mostly one main family, so you don't really have to keep track of many. It's just the other family is the family that Zandi marries into, and so it becomes like sort of a, sort of opposite or reflection of their own family. How did the names? So when I first started writing this book when I was in my 20s, the names were different. Well, so Koniswa was actually called Tandiwe. And the reason why I changed her name was because by the time I was writing this book, there were so many books with the character Tandiwe, and I was like, geez, that name has been overdone. So I just had to then rethink of a name. But also, when I name my characters, I'm very intentional about their names. They say something, they mean something. So X, Y, and Z mean something when you meet VW. So those kind of things. So I'm very intentional about what the names are and what they mean. Because especially in Woody names speak, and they say they have meaning on their own.
The reason why I called Pastor Abraham Father Abraham is Father Abraham in the Judeo-Christian Islamic sense is the dude who had like 2 kids, right? And He had the illegitimate wine because he was impatient with the wife to produce another wine, and he dumped that wine in the desert, and then like this one, that became the son who got like all the values, all the celebration. And this poor wanted to run between Marwa and Safa and like get the wealth from the water from Zamzam, and that's why some of us pray to the east, towards Mecca, just in case you're wondering. And it's also about that, and that's the contestation in the Abrahamic faith about like who of Abraham's anointed sons has a right to the throne. That's why I called him Father Abraham.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between Judaism and Islam. Yeah, that's where the fight actually rift between. Who is the promised child?
Yes. Who's the legitimate child?
And the book talks a lot about legitimacy. What are legitimate moments? What are legitimate relationships? Yeah.
If that's
who are the legitimate kids? Are they illegitimate? So that's also another question to ask yourself.
Because there's also a little thing about, some of us do come from families where, someone thought their older sister was their older sister, meanwhile, no, it was your mom. And this happens a lot. This happens a lot. So, these things do it. This whole thing, there's that show, Udadam, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people kind of drag that show, we all hate Zola, but let's deal with the content of Udadam. And why a lot of mothers refuse to say who the father is. Because a lot of people think, because of the way that we police women's sexuality, we assume that a 15-year-old has a choice on how she's going to reproduce. And then the family like swoops in, and with our parents' generation, you get sent to finishing school. You know what finishing school is? Where you go and give birth, and the child will come back later, and then your mom says, no, I went away to have a baby. And these things get played out. It's not just the black thing. In the Afrikaner culture in South Africa, guys, you must read fiction of Afrikaners in South Africa. They've got stories for days. And then you realize we're all doing this stuff together.
Yeah, and this friend of mine was telling me, even about white moms also get the same stigmatization. Being a single mother. She used to tell me, don't tell anyone you're a single mother at your son's school. Just play it. Yeah, because the reception changes. Yeah, and it's not just for black women, it's white women too.
So, final question from the audience. What do you think makes you a great writer? What do you think makes people read your books? Where can we find your books? Comment to Sue. I don't read fiction and I read The Polygamist, and now I want to read your books. Something on your Twitter followers. But you have to answer questions written.
Yeah. What makes a great writer? I don't know. I have no idea actually. And I often wonder if I can be called a great writer. So yeah, I'm not sure to answer to that question.
What do you think makes people read your books?
I don't know. What do you like reading about my books? Is it the drama? What is it? Because people will always say I deliver. What do I deliver? So clearly, I'm writing stuff that does resonate with audiences. I don't know what it is. Because when I write, it's not like I consciously think of.
Do you think about the audience, or you're just like, I just need to get this out?
For me, it's just a story I want to tell. So I never think about audience until at the end, when it's finished, when we're out there. So that's why I'm always saying, I'm not sure what it is. Okay, but people it's always the same thing, that they feel they can resonate with the stories, or they see themselves in the stories. So I think that's probably what people like about the books.
The final was just a comment. Didn't read fiction until The Polygamist, you've got a new convert.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
There are lots of converts.
And we'll add to that, we'll end it on that. Congratulations, Sue, on your third beautiful book. You have been an amazing audience. Risking your time and your lives to come here. Is there anything you'd like to wrap up with? Sue?
No, I just want to thank you all for coming, and thank you for continuing to buy my books. I'm here because of you, that you keep reading me, because this is my, not only is my passion,